The 2026 World Cup, Power and Politics on the Pitch. A strategic analysis of the tri-national tournament. Good morning, thank you for being here. And thank you for bringing your full attention to what I believe is one of the most consequential intersections of sport, economics, and geopolitics that we have witnessed in this generation. 48 teams, 104 matches, 39 days of continuous competition, 3 host nations, and a tournament that began on the 11th of June, 2026, in Mexico City, a city that, for one afternoon, stopped being a capital of a nation and became, simply, the center of the world. The 2026 FIFA World Cup is, by every measurable dimension, the largest sporting event in human history. It is larger in format, larger in economic scale, and as we will see over the course of the next 30 minutes, larger in political consequence than any edition that has preceded it. But I want to be direct with you from the outset. This presentation is not about football. Or rather, it is not only about football. Before we proceed into the analysis itself, I want to establish the structure of what we are going to cover and, more importantly, why we are going to cover it in this sequence. This presentation is organized around 5 areas of inquiry. The first is the tournament itself, its scale, its format, and what makes this particular edition historically distinct from every World Cup that has preceded it. We need to establish the factual baseline before we can interpret it. The second is host nation agendas. The United States, Canada, and Mexico are not passive venues. They are sovereign nations with active national interests, and each of them is using this tournament to pursue a distinct set of objectives: commercial, diplomatic, and economic. Understanding those objectives is essential to understanding the decisions that have been made and the tensions that have emerged. The third area is macroeconomic impact. The headline figure $80 billion in projected global output is the number you will see in press releases. It is not, by itself, analytically useful. What is useful is understanding how that figure is distributed.
The 2026 FIFA World Cup is, structurally, a different tournament from anything that has come before it. Not incrementally different, categorically different. 104 matches, compared to 64 in every edition since 1998. 48 competing nations, compared to 32. 39 consecutive days of competition spanning 3 countries, 6 time zones, and 16 host cities across 2 continents. The projected global economic output associated with this tournament is $80.1 billion. That figure comes from a joint study by Open Economics and the World Trade Organization, and we will examine it in granular detail in the macroeconomics section. For now, hold it as a baseline. The tournament began on the 11th of June, with Mexico hosting South Africa in Mexico City, a symbolic opening that positioned Latin American football culture, rather than European or North American, as the face of this event in its first hours. The tri-national hosting is unprecedented in the history of the World Cup. And that structural novelty is not merely a logistical curiosity, it is an analytical opportunity. Because when you place 3 sovereign nations side by side in a shared endeavor, the differences in their motivations, their constraints, and their definitions of success become visible in ways they normally are not. Let us take each host nation in turn. The United States is the dominant partner in this arrangement, by every metric. It is hosting the majority of matches. It will host the final. Its projected gross output, $30.5 billion from U.S.-hosted matches alone, with a direct GDP contribution of $17.2 billion, dwarfs the economic contribution of either of its co-hosts in absolute terms. The United States approaches this tournament as, fundamentally, a commercial proposition. Its stadium infrastructure, its broadcast networks, its hospitality industry, and its sponsorship ecosystem are all calibrated to extract maximum economic value from a captive global audience.
The economics of the 2026 World Cup require us to make a critical distinction, one that is routinely obscured in the way these numbers are communicated to the public. The distinction is between gross output and net benefit. Gross output $80.1 billion measures the total value of economic activity that is associated with the tournament. Hotel stays, restaurant meals, transportation, broadcasting rights, sponsorship income, ticket revenue, stadium operations, merchandise, all of it, aggregated. It is a large number, and it is a real number. But it is not the same as asking, are the host nations, and the host communities, better off because of this tournament? And the answer to that question is considerably more complicated. The United States captures the largest absolute share of economic activity, $30.5 billion in gross output, $17.2 billion in direct GDP contribution. For the world's largest economy, these are significant numbers. They are all
We turn now to the dimension of this tournament that has received, in my view, insufficient serious analytical attention in the mainstream commentary: the geopolitical flashpoints. There are 4 that I want to address specifically. Each of them is real. Each of them has had measurable consequences. And each of them raises questions that extend well beyond the 90 minutes of any individual match. The first, and most significant, concerns the relationship between the United States and Iran. The ongoing state of U.S.-Iranian diplomatic relations, characterized by sanctions, mutual suspicion, and the absence of formal diplomatic ties, created a direct operational crisis for the Iranian national football team. Visa applications submitted by members of the Iranian delegation, players, coaching staff, officials, and supporters were subject to significant processing delays and, in a number of documented cases, denials.
Before we move to policy implications, I want to take a moment to consolidate the evidence to bring together the quantitative indicators and the qualitative signals that have emerged from everything we have discussed. On the confirmed, quantitative side, $80.1 billion in projected global economic output, $30.5 billion attributable to U.S.-hosted matches, $17.2 billion in direct U.S. GDP contribution. 4 nations competing in their first ever FIFA World Cup. These are the anchoring facts of this tournament's economic and structural profile. But I want to dwell for a moment on what I am calling the signal indicators, the qualitative data points that do not appear in the headline numbers, but which are, in some respects, more analytically significant. The first signal is the visa approval disparity. It is documented, it is not disputed by the relevant authorities, and it represents a structural inequity in access to a tournament that claims to represent the universality of football. The second signal is the issuance of formal travel advisories by multiple international organizations.
We arrive now at the policy conclusions, the so what of everything we have examined. I want to address 4 implications directly and without equivocation. The first is the trade-off between openness and security. This trade-off is real. I want to be clear about that. Host governments have legitimate, non-negotiable public safety obligations. Venue security, crowd management, and counterterrorism preparedness are not optional extras, they are the foundational conditions under which a major international event can take place safely. No serious analyst disputes this. But the manner in which security obligations are discharged is a policy choice, and policy choices have consequences. When immigration enforcement is conducted in ways that make international visitors from specific countries or backgrounds feel surveilled, targeted, or at risk, the consequences are not only ethical. They are economic, they are reputational, and they are strategic. Suppressed attendance from certain regions reduces revenue.
We come, finally, to the conclusion. And I want to speak to it directly, not with the language of analysis, but with the language of considered judgment. The 2026 FIFA World Cup is more than a football tournament. It always was. Every World Cup is, in some measure, a mirror held up to the world as it actually is, not as we would like it to be. And the world that this tournament is reflecting back to us is one defined by a set of tensions that are profound, structural, and unresolved. The tension between economic aspiration and political reality. The 3 host nations projected extraordinary economic returns from this tournament. The reality, as we have seen, is more complex, more asymmetric, and more contingent than the projections suggested. The gap between aspiration and reality is not a failure of analysis. It is a feature of the world we inhabit, where economic decisions are never made in political vacuums. The decisions that will be made in the months and years following this tournament on FIFA